Welcome to A Night for Truth, a series of conversations we are having with Dr. Alice von Hildebrand on the work of her husband, Dietrich von Hildebrand, the great Catholic philosopher and theologian of the 20th century. When we were last speaking, we had come up to the point of mentioning the great story or myth and opera, Tristan and Isolde, which by everybody's standards is one of the great operas of Wagner. They are considered among the great lovers of the West, and yet there's a tragic, enormously tragic dimension in the love there. And your husband has some interesting commentary about the tragedy that can attend love, even love in the bond of marriage. What does he say about that?
His idea is that marriage, now I speak on a purely natural point of view, that marriage is the most perfect form of community, that the communion between husband and wife is the greatest source of earthly happiness. But if this love is not redeemed by the supernatural, it has a tragic character. And as I mentioned in the earlier episode, but let me repeat it, man is finite. Man is imperfect. Man is bound by time and space. And the very moment that you fall in love, and I speak of a deep, authentic love, which is a response to value, to the lovableness and beauty of another human person, suddenly you discover that you would like this love to have a dimension of infinity and eternity. And you can't reach it. On top of it, you will always experience day in and day out how difficult it is to live up completely and totally to the demands that love makes upon me. For example, you feel tired, or you feel sick, or you feel nervous, or you're preoccupied, and then all of a sudden there is a sort of dust over this beautiful relationship that should be kept fully alive day in and day out. You see, a beautiful marriage, a perfect marriage, is not one in which there's never any conflict. That can happen if you practically live apart and meet from time to time. That can happen. But it is the one in which the daily small struggles of everyday life always lead to a deeper and greater love. And I mean, this is why this does not happen very often in natural love, but it does happen in supernatural love. This is why the word thank you should be so prominent among the spouses. We take so much for granted. The husband does so much for his wife. The wife does so much for the husband, and after a while, it becomes routine, it becomes normal. Obviously, she's my wife and she has to do so and so. Obviously, he's my husband and he has to provide for me, and that sort of things. And then on top of it, you see, in the human soul, and let us face it, and we should say so with tears, there is a law of spiritual gravity, that we start on a high plane when we fall in love. We have wings. It was Plato who says in Phaedrus, at the sight of beauty, wings grow on the human soul. And this is precisely what happens in love, that all of a sudden you have wings. You shake yourself from the dullness and boredom of everyday life. My husband had a dear friend, and like many, many men, he was totally absorbed by his professional work. That was the work, and from morning to night he'll go there and he'll work and he'll try to improve and to succeed and so on and so on. And he fell in love. And the girl was not very responsive. And then he enlisted my husband's help. And she invited him to stay in his beautiful mansion in Munich, and they talked about love and so on and so on. And very gently he tried to open her eyes to the lovableness of this man, who was a very, very good and noble man. And finally, she accepted and she reciprocated his love. You know what his first response was? But no, my business is no longer important. That's so
spoken as a true lover.
That is so classical. All of a sudden, he realized that the human relationship hierarchy of values, which plays such a role in my husband's life, he said to me, I recall, shortly before his death, I have always tried to be faithful to the hierarchy of values. What is more important should be given precedence. So I say there's always a danger, and this happens in many, many marriages. I mean, many of the marriages that I know which have difficulties are to be traced back to the fact that the husband is so absorbed by his profession to make money, to succeed, to get recognition, to have success, and so on and so on, that he comes home to rest. And my husband says he could come home the very moment you see business must be done. It is important. You've got to support your family. But your heart should be in your family, because this is something which is so much more important. So the very moment that I fall in love, I realize if I truly love, I realize my poverty. I can live in the illusion that I'm all right. And usually what we do to convince ourselves that we are all right is to compare ourselves to people that are less talented than we are, or whatever it might be, in simplicity. I'm not doing that badly all in all. And the moment you truly fall in love, you realize that, my goodness, what a discrepancy. What an abyss between what I can give and what I would like to give. And you desperately try to make up for what you lack, and you're always going to fall short.
There's that sense in which love both brings one alive a thousandfold.
Absolutely.
And also brings a clarity of vision, next to which the way I saw things before seems dim and shrouded. And the true lover, it seems to me, the true spouse, is suddenly endowed or blessed with an enormous clarity of vision. And one of the besetting dangers of marriage is, a gradual dulling of that, or dwindling.
You settle down. It's all very good to be so full of enthusiasm. Now we have to be, quotes, reasonable. Yeah. And you will notice that sometimes, or often, unfortunately, the word reasonable means mediocrity. Yeah. Now, you recall in the Divine Comedy, the very beginning of Inferno, of hell, that there is people, the life of people who have been indifferent.
Even before you get to limbo, it's
neither hot nor cold. And then Dante says so strikingly, these people were never alive.
Yes.
And that was my husband's main theme. Unless you truly love, you are never alive. You vegetate, you go from one thing to another, and one very fine day you discover that you have death's door and you have never lived. You see, it is a sublime adventure. But like every adventure, it has its risks. Number one, that after the enthusiasm of falling in love and the overwhelming experience of seeing the beauty of another person, I settle down, become reasonable, and allow things which are secondary to take precedence. Take things for granted and no longer appreciate the tremendous gift, waking up in the morning and seeing my beloved is there.
I wonder whether the male of the species, I don't know, is more susceptible to that dullness, that ingratitude, than the female. The reason I'm saying that is that as far as I can tell, in 90% or 99% of marriages which fail, and even in marriages which end up being good and rich marriages, the testimony of young brides after the first year or so of marriage is, he doesn't know I exist. He's not paying any attention.
He's just sleeping with me, but apart from that, I never see him and I share nothing.
And I wonder whether the men are more prone to cloddishness than the women.
Tom, I thank you for saying that yourself, because if I said so, immediately people would say, well, basically she's a feminist.
No.
You see, but if you say so, I have to say, I believe it is true precisely, because of the male structure, which is more creative, more productive, more oriented towards the outside world than the woman is. You see, for a woman, now I'm not speaking about feminists because everything has been disrupted, but she knows deep down the heart, the family, love. These are the things which matter most.
Yeah.
And this is why I believe that unless she's perverted by self-centeredness, by vanity, by selfishness, by self-pity, and all the weaknesses that women can have, she is more religiously inclined.
There's no question.
When I was a child in Belgium, it was a Catholic country, but there's absolutely no doubt about the fact that there were very many more women than men in churches. And at the turn of the century...
It's still true.
Yes. Well, not so much in the United States than in Europe. I tell you why. Because Americans have less human respect. Many Europeans feel to go to church, well, that's all right for women because they're weak and need help, but I can do it on my own. That is a great male temptation. And at the turn of the century, something very interesting happened in France. The French Academy said that it was going to give an award, some sort of recognition, to the person who best answered the following question. Why are there more men than women in jail? Which is a fact.
Yes.
And the one that was recognized as being the best answer was because someone wrote very simply, because there are more women than men in churches. Now, when you look at statistics, we should not take statistics overly seriously, but nevertheless, sometimes they give us some valid information. Some time ago, I read that one of the sad phenomena of today is that proportionately the number of women that are jailed has increased by so many percent, and the percentage of men that go to jail is more or less steady. It's not much worse than it ever was. You see, now this shows that if a woman betrays her mission, which is interiority, which is a heart, which is devotion, which is reverence, which is a self-giving to others, society is going to be totally disrupted. It is more disrupted by the unfaithfulness of women than it is by the unfaithfulness of men.
There's no question that that's true. It seems to me that I've often said to my students, it's bad when men are debauched and degraded, but it is a disaster when women or womanhood, as has happened in our own epoch, when womanhood is debauched by illusions such as certain kinds of violent feminism and so on. And when she is lured away from this which is the crown of femininity, namely this, as you say, this interiority, this being at home in what is real, in what is true, ultimately in God. When that is blitzed and debauched, then the whole race is in trouble, because women are the custodians of our humanity. And
of tradition.
Yes.
And of true culture. Men are the inventors. But women, so to speak, realize culture in the home.
Yeah.
You see, the way that a home is arranged by a loving woman, when you see the touch of finesse and refinement and love that she puts into what she's doing. Of course, what women understood beautifully up to, let us say, 50 or 60 years ago, when the feminist movement started giving such impetus, was that her role is the holy luring of her husband back home.
Yes.
So that when he comes home, he doesn't say, well, this is I'm going to rest and put up my feet, and then I'm going to be served my dinner, and then I look at the newspaper, and if my wife's talk, I'm just going to say, let me read the political news. But if she makes of the home a place of joy and love and peace and harmony, when he's harassed from business, and when he has the blessing sometimes of having a defeat, and then he's crestfallen, I call it the blessing of having a defeat, because in my experience, people that have never been defeated are incredibly prone to all sorts of illusions. You see, the greatness of a person is to have a defeat. I don't speak now of moral defeat. I speak of defeat in business, not acknowledged or trampled thought and so on, and whatever it might be. And if you can take a defeat, and you take it with joy and peace, and you recall the words of Isaiah, that Christ was looked down upon. He doesn't mention Christ, but it's so clearly pointing to him. Certainly. He was rejected. He was a man of sorrow. He was despised. And and when we are despised, and hopefully all of us are more or less despised at one point in our lives, instead of being crushed and revolting and it's unjust and I'm bitter, that you accept this defeat, and then you come home and you have a loving wife who says to you, what does it matter? God loves you and I love you, and we have these lovely children, and and to direct his attention to truly the things that are truly important. But I grant you, I do believe that many marriages are unhappy because the husband comes home as a place of relaxation. And my husband said he should do the very opposite, and if you're a little sloppy in business, well, it is too bad that the world is going to continue to exist. But if when you come home, it's no longer the place when you're fully there and fully present, and you acknowledge and keep thanking God for the gift of your wife and your children, well, obviously the marriage is going to be unhappy.
I think every husband, every married man worth his salt will say a very loud amen to every syllable you're saying. I think a man who has had the experience of a wonderful spouse, a wonderful wife, will say, my wife has given me my true manhood. My wife has given me my very masculinity, my humanity is increasingly the gift of my wife simply by being what she is and who she is. I would sink into the worst sort of sloth and cloddishness left to my own devices.
As I told you, my husband's career was a failure, and he proclaimed it loudly. He never was bothered by it. He did absolutely everything to ruin his career. For example, by writing in defense of purity when he was professor at the University of Munich. And one day one of his colleagues said, what sort of a professor is that? He writes a book for high school girls. And then afterwards, he ruined his career in Vienna because he was thundering against Nazi Germany and against anti-Semitism and so on and so on. He didn't make himself popular. He never minded, but the moment that he appeared in front of God, I'll show you of one thing. He had never given priority to things that were secondary and less important. And he said that to me. The guiding thread in my life has been to follow the hierarchy of values. And in his mind and in the Christian mind, the family, the love between husband and wife, is infinitely more important than success. What good does it do me if my husband is President of the United States and then he's so and so and so and so? We're not going to go into details. What good does it do me?
I often think of this when I am driving through a neighborhood which has very, very splashy houses, and each one is bigger than the last one, and beautifully groomed lawns and this and so forth. And I often wonder, good, that's very. I love beautiful houses, but
so do I.
But what is the quality of life that is going on in there? It is that the shrine, the ark of love, of that which marriage is all about, or is it a hollow mockery? I told you my husband said that he had such a beautiful youth, and then to make a comparison which is amusing, his disciple and very faithful follower Bill Mara, who unfortunately died last year, said to me many, many times, I had a marvelous youth.
And I visited the place where he lived in Jersey City. No, I don't think that I'm making an overstatement by saying it was slummy. It was a miserable, shabby little house. And I said to him, Bill, what made you so happy? He said, oh, it's very simple. My father loved my mother loved my father, and they loved us. And that's all he needed. And he was probably one of the least complicated persons I've met in my life. He has such a sound sense for what mattered and did not matter. He was, from this point of view, a truly disciple of my husband. And I'm happy to say that he's another of his disciples who is married, had 6 children. And I was visiting them some time ago, and it's a very happy family life. And I congratulated him. I said, you know, you truly feel there's harmony between husband and wife and the children. He said, well, I'm trying to live up to what your husband taught me. This matters more than my profession. And he's doing very well in his profession, but nevertheless, his heart is in the family.
It's interesting, those very words that Bill Mara spoke concerning the influence of your husband on him is the unanimous and continuous testimony in my own family. There were 6 brothers and sisters in my generation. We're all in our 60s and 70s now. And every single one of us, I think, would say that the greatest influence in our background, and the one, I think, which saved us for the faith as well, was my father loved my mother loved my father, and they loved us. If you have that in the background, you have everything.
Incredibly rich. And yet, I mean, suppose that you take the cases of people whose parents are immensely rich, and this disharmony between father and mother. And sometimes the child knows that he wasn't welcome or something of the sort. You know, it's devastating.
Yes.
You know, you can often speak of poor, rich people.
Yeah.
They have so much money and they have so little. And the other case, when you have the thing that truly matters. Now, as my husband said, purely human love, beautiful as it is, and it has been sung so admirably by the poets. I mean, think of Shakespeare, for example, or think of Dante, or think of Petrarch, and you can go on and on. You see, truly it is something magnificent. And simultaneously, because of our fallen nature, there's always a danger that dust settles on it, that we fall into a trap which is called habit. And, you know, it was Kierkegaard who wrote so beautifully, 100 cannon to tell us, remind us every single day not to fall into the traps of habit. You know, just imagine if you receive Holy Communion because you've always done so. It's a habit. Something will be missing in your day if you didn't do it. Instead of waking up in the morning and say, what a grace, what something overwhelming that my Savior is going to come into my body and sanctify it.
You know, this is what Kierkegaard also called in some places despair, that is, to be sunk in everydayness, to be sunk in everydayness, to have lost the
and in some way
vision.
to opt for it, because in sickness unto death, Kierkegaard makes it clear that of course there is a solution to despair, which is faith and confidence in God. But if you turn it down and you simply say, which is a tremendous danger today, I can do it alone. I do not need help. And I mean, this is once again maybe a greater danger for men than for women. You see, I simply say women have a tremendous advantage. You know, I hope I speak in the name of my whole, you know, the whole sex, to know that they are weak. And when you know that you are weak, it's easier to go on your knees and to beg for help. When a woman gives birth, she prays. It is said there are no atheists in foxholes. But how many men spend their lives in foxholes, and the moment they're out of it, they forget about it. I can do it on my own. No, it's another tremendous danger in purely natural love, to idolize the beloved.
Yes.
That your beloved one becomes your God. And that you
Now
feel in some way, yes. Of course, you're going to tell me that we are running out of time.
Alas. But in a sense, we've come to the point of whetting everyone's appetite for the next conversation, because the business of idolizing the beloved is something that I think very few of us think much about, and it's an enormous danger and a travesty of what true love is. But thank you, Dr. von Hildebrand, for, again, bringing us the work and the thought of your husband, and I hope that our listeners will be with us as we continue our conversation on A Night for Truth, the work of Dietrich von Hildebrand.